Respiratory System by Matt Owen. Structure of the respiratory system. The respiratory system is split up into two main parts, the upper and the lower. Respiratory tract, which each consists of the following parts. So, upper, you've got the mouth, the nose and the nasal cavity, which are the main function. These parts is to warm up and filter and moisten the air that is being breathed in, like that. The pharynx is where the throat divides into the trachea, and the oesophagus, which is the food pipe, and the trachea is the windpipe. There is a small flap of cartilage named the epiglottis, which prevents food from getting into the trachea. The larynx is also known as the voice box, as it is where sound comes from. It also helps us protect the trachea by producing a strong cough reflex if any solid object should pass through the epiglottis. The epiglottis, as I've said, is to stop food from going into your lungs, and it's like a flat sort of piece of flesh. We've got the lower part. Also, you've got the trachea. The bronchi, which is the trachea divides into two tubes called the bronchi, and that's the one entering the left and the one entering the right lung. The bronchi is narrower, longer and more horizontal than the right. Irregular rings of cartilage surround the bronchi, whose walls also consist of smooth muscle. Once inside the lung, the bronchi split several ways, forming tertiary bronchi. The bronchioles are the tertiary bronchi continue to divide and become bronchioles, very narrow tubes, less than 1 millimeter in diameter. There is no cartilage within the bronchi, and they lead to alveolar sacs. Alveoli, individual hollow cavities contained with alveolar sacs, or otherwise known as ducts. Alveoli have very thin walls which permit exchange of gas, oxygen and carbon dioxide. They are surrounded by a network of capillaries into which the inspired gases pass. There are approximately 3 million alveoles within an average adult lung. The diaphragm. The diaphragm is a broad band of muscle which sits underneath the lungs, attaching to the lower ribs, sternum and lumbar spine, and forming the base of the thoracic cavity. Lower part 2, you've got the intercostal muscle. The intercostal muscle. They help move and make up the wall of the chest and are located between the ribs. These muscle groups include external intercostal muscles and the intercostal muscles. The external intercostal muscles help increase thoracic size from front to back and side to side with contraction of the external intercostal muscles. These muscles help in inhaling, both forced and quiet. The lungs are a pair of spongy air-filled organs located on either side of the chest. The chest, which is the thorax. The trachea, or otherwise known as the windpipe, conducts inhaled air into the lungs through its tubular branches called bronchi. The bronchi then divide into smaller and smaller branches, otherwise known as bronchioles, finally becoming microscopic, which means you can't really see them without a microscope. Function of the respiratory system. The function of the respiratory system is to supply blood with oxygen in order for the blood to get to the oxygen and all of the body parts. The respiratory system does this by simply breathing. When we breathe, we inhale, take in oxygen, and exhale, give out carbon dioxide. This exchange of gases in the respiratory system means of getting to the blood. Respiration is achieved through the mouth, nose, trachea, lungs, and diaphragm. Function of the respiratory system again. Oxygen enters the respiratory system through the mouth and the nose. The oxygen then passes through the larynx, where speech sound is produced. and the trachea, which is a tube that enters the chest cavity. In the chest cavity, the trachea then splits into two smaller tubes called the bronchi. Each bronchus then divides again, forming the bronchial tubes. The bronchial tubes then lead directly into the lungs, where they divide into many smaller tubes, which then connect to tin air sacs called alveoli. The average adult lungs contains about 600 million of these spongy sacs that are surrounded by capillaries. The inhaled oxygen passes into the blood, arterial blood. Meanwhile, the waste-rich products that's from the veins releases its carbon dioxide into the alveoli. The carbon dioxide then follows the same path out of the lungs when you exhale. Inspiration, a brief description of this is contraction of the respiratory muscle, which consists of external, intercostal and the diaphragm. External intercostal muscles make up the rib cage, pivot on the thoracic vertebrae, moving upwards and outwards. The diaphragm then contracts downwards, increasing the depth of the thoracic cavity, drawing in air. Expiration is then relaxed of the respiratory muscles, which cause the rib cage to move up, downwards and inwards. Thoracic cavity decreases in size and lungs recoil, forcing air out. Diaphragm relaxes into a dome shape, and the internal intercostal used during exercise. Respiratory volumes. I've just got them on my phone, so. You've got tidal volume. Tidal volume is a term used to describe the amount of air breathed in and out with each breath. Under normal condition, this represents about 500 centimeters cubed of air breathed, both inhaled and exhaled. Of this, approximately 2/3, so 350 centimeters cubed, reaches the alveoli in the lungs, where gaseous exchange takes place. The remaining 150 centimeter cube fills the pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, and is known as dead or stationary air. During exercise, tidal volume increases to allow more air to pass through the lungs. The volume of the air passing through the lungs each minute is known as minute volume and is product of breathing rate and the amount of air taken in within each breath. The lungs normally contain about 350 centimeters cubed of fresh air, 150 centimeters cubed of dead air, and 2,500 centimeters cubed of air that has already undergone gaseous exchange. Inspiratory reserve volume. This can be up to 1,500 centimeters cubed and is the amount of the additional air that can be breathed out after normal expiration. At the end of the normal breath, the lungs contain residual volume plus the expiratory reserve volume. If you exhale as much as possible, this residual volume remains the same. Residual volume is where you breathe out as hard as you possibly can. The amount of air remains as your residual volume and is necessary to prevent your lungs from collapsing. Expiratory reserve volume is the maximal air breathed out at a normal inspiration. Vital capacity is the most air you can exhale after taking the deepest breath that you can. It can be up to 10 times more than you would usually exhale. And the total lung capacity is the vital lung capacity plus the residual volume and the total amount of air the lungs can hold. The average lung capacity is 6,000 millilitres, although this varies with height, sex, and health and age. Controlling of breathing. Breathing to us seems pretty easy and simple to do. However, it's actually controlled by two very different complex elements, which are the neural system and the chemical system. The neural system involves neurons, which are cells that conduct impulses and located in parts of the brainstem called the reticular formation and the pons. The neurons are critical in respiration. For example, the respiratory group controls the rhythm of breathing. The chemical control are the chemical factors that control the rate of breathing. This is due to chemoreceptors that are located in the auric of the arch and carotid arteries. They detect changing levels of the oxygen and carbon dioxide in the bloodstream. and notify the brain to regulate breathing accordingly. For example, carbon dioxide levels increase due to the exercise. Chemoreceptors notice this. Lungs. The lungs are the two cone-shaped organs suspended in the pleural cavities. They're surrounded by a pleural membrane and are made up of elastic tissue. They divide into lobes. The right is larger than the accommodate the heart. This space is known as the cardiac notch. I'll just briefly explain each one. Lobes. Each lung is divided into lobes. The right lung has 3 lobes. The left only has 2 lobes. Pleural membrane. The lungs are surrounded by membrane known as pleuria. These contain cavity with a fluid that lubricates the surface as the lungs expand and contract. Their main job is to prevent friction. The pleural fluid. The pleural membrane produces pleural fluid which fills the space between the visceral and placeral pleura. This lubricating fluid allows the lungs to glide over one another easily. The thoracic cavity. This is the full name for the chamber of the chest that is protected by the thoracic wall. It is protected from the abdominal cavity of the diaphragm. And finally, the visceral pleura. The visceral pleura is the innermost of the 2 pleural membranes. It covers the surface of the lungs. Thanks for listening and watching.